The sitting is resumed. Prior to the suspension for lunch, this Honourable Chamber was debating the Appropriation Bill 2025 in Standing Finance Committee. We return to the Standing Finance Committee.
This Honourable House is now in Standing Finance Committee. So Michael Northwest.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Madam Minister and your team. I have one simple query, and it relates to the trust loan fund. In the earlier stages of the trust loan, applicants completed the physical application. Can you provide any information on what is the new process when it comes to applying for a trust loan via the new system?
Thank you for the question, Honourable Member. I'm going to go actually directly to the head of the Trust Fund Limited, Mr. Jerry Amos, to give you an update on the processes that have been evolving in that agency and how they have been moving to simplify and make it easier for persons to be able to access their services. Mr. Amos?
Thank you, Minister. Good afternoon, members. Member, thanks for the question. We have moved from the paper system to a paperless system. The trust loan process has now gone fully online. So applicants can go online and fill out the application form. It's a seamless process from beginning to end now. However, that has not cut out the personalized sections of the borrower's trust for them to have three aspects. One, if an application fails for some reason, we have someone designated to actually contact the client to find out if that client needs help. Two, if the client cannot fill the application, we invite them to the office, so we have a person there, and we have set up a kiosk that they can actually fill out the form at the office. Three, to ensure that we still have personal contact with those clients, we actually go out to the client, visit the location. There we have the interview with them as we do the site visit. So we still have that personalized touch. The beauty of going out to the clients to actually do that visit is that we have the client's location. So what we are doing with the LMS system, the new LMS system, we're doing some geo-positioning. So we could tell within a parish how many barbers we have, how many hairdressers we have, how many restaurants we have, how many shops we have within a particular location. So the geo-positioning is in place. So not only, member, do we have an LMS system that takes applications, we also have a business development side of that system. I thank the ministry for assisting us in making that possible. So what can happen with that business development side? Just a few things I'll just inform you about. A client, whether a member of the Barbados Trust Fund or just a normal entrepreneur, can log on to our system, answer some questions as relates to their business, and our AI engine will generate a business development plan for that member. So that is one. Two, we can also track growth. So when a client first applies for a loan, we take all the information where the client is at a time. When our business development team goes out and collects information, we could track to see where that client has been moving as it relates to their financials. So we can actually see what impact that client is having in their community and on whole on the country as it relates to economic development. The beauty of the online system is that our minister can have access, so she can log on, not for personal information, but for statistics, and see how a particular sector is performing. Our board can have access to that as well. So it's not only, member, online application, but it's also a business development application where all the data is stored, and we can use that data for all kind of information generation. So statistics to the ministry, all of that is rarely at hand online. Thanks for the question.
Thank you.
Honourable Member for St. Michael North.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon to the House and, of course, the Minister and her team in the well. I have 3 questions. The first question relates to natural gas. I notice under, I believe natural gas probably would fall under your MPC vote, but I also realize that you have a Natural Resources Department 01 sub-program 0154, and then the MPC one is 0454. I noticed that there is a $800,000 increase under sub-program 0154, and I realize that there is a significant decrease under NPC 14 million to $5.6 million. So I would love for you to be able to explain the overarching strategy relative to the use and the deployment of our natural resources on island. I ask this from the perspective of our constituents who, to this day, make inquiries to me relative to the expansion, the possible expansion of natural gas within the St. Michael North communities. And I know that there is also a policy, a stated policy by the administration that we are going to be seeking to be carbon neutral by 2030. So just for the benefit of my constituents, can you explain your approach to the natural gas expansion within the ministry, and how can they go about having those services within the various the different parts of the constituency of St. Michael North?
Thank you, Honourable Member. And Chairman, thank you for the opportunity to point out the differences between those 2 sub-programs. The Department of Natural Resources, that is represented by Mr. Jamar White, who is the Director of Natural Resources here. He's with us, and you can hear from him in a few moments. But that department focuses on the policy development and the on- and offshore development of our resources. You have 26 offshore blocks, and that is under the management of the Department of Natural Resources. The use or the non-use of those offshore resources because of Barbados' climate policy is really what is reflective of the decrease in the allocation in that specific line item in the head, but also what you will see under that department, the development this year of a multi-energy development strategy, which speaks to our use of, and I believe we spoke about it earlier, our onshore well development program for both oil and associated gas in our existing onshore wells, and then also how that coexists side by side with our climate transition, climate objectives, I should say, and our energy transition into renewables. That's what that refers to under the Department of Natural Resources. The significant decrease under the head for the allocation for the NPC, however, is a different matter. The NPC, like the Barbados National Oil Company in this ministry, like external to this ministry, the Grantley Adams International Airport, the Barbados Port, and others, those are commercial state-owned enterprises and therefore do not typically receive transfers or subsidies from central government. What you see on the books for MPC is the last tranche of the financial resources under the Inter-American Development Bank Mains Replacement Program. And so as that project closes out, the funds that you see allocated to MPC relate to the closure of an existing loan facility for the MPC for the project that I spoke about before for mains replacement along the south coast and in some parts of central Barbados. But that is a separate matter from the capital mains expansion that I spoke about earlier, which now would have to be capitalized. And the work that we did in mapping that capital mains expansion out across the country really is meant to then inform what kind of financing and investment would Barbados require through the amalgamated company? And I want to take the opportunity here to point out that during the course of this financial year, the MPC as we know it will be no more, and the MPC Act is expected to be repealed and replaced. And so we will have the Barbados National Oil Company, the Barbados National Terminal Company, and the National Petroleum Corporation amalgamated into a single entity, and that entity will be a commercial state-owned enterprise not on the government's books, and therefore completely self-sustaining and earning its own revenue. And it will be from their own revenue and their own balance sheet that the Capital Works expansion program nationally that would benefit your constituents, honorable member, and all of the constituents that across the country are asking about access to natural gas, including me, because I don't have natural gas at home either, but that will be on the balance sheet of the Barbados National Energy Company once it is deemed to be financially feasible.
Okay, thank you. And just as a follow-up to that one, because the tail end of your answer was going in the direction that I wanted us to go in, which is how does the constituent in Cave Hill, Grisettes, Eden Lodge, how does that person who is seeking, or that district that is seeking to have natural gas, how do they go about getting it done? Because it seems to them like it has been something that they've been asking for a long time without being able to access it. And we know the benefits, of course, of having natural gas, but it seems like it is elusive. So I just wanted you to give clear guidance to my people as it relates to how do they go about getting natural gas. And I wanted you to square that with the government's policy relative to carbon neutral by 2030.
Thank you for the question. And Chairman, the government has had a policy, and I believe it was last year, where the Honourable Prime Minister pointed out that of the 26 offshore wells that we have, offshore blocks, not wells, offshore blocks that we have, and we've had them for some time, and that's what I was referring to earlier in the Department of Natural Resources. Prime Minister here in this Parliament pointed out that because of Barbados's climate objectives, that she would rather have Barbados leave the oil in the ground. And if anyone could then support paying Barbados in lieu of extracting that oil, and in so doing, minimizing emissions. It is why the question raised earlier by the Honourable Minister of Environment about abatement technologies is important. If there are abatement technologies available, and we are able to safely and minimize the emissions derived from oil extraction, then that would be a different conversation. But I believe Prime Minister has been very clear about Barbados as a climate champion, as a climate leader, initiating an offshore bid round for oil and gas. That, however, is different for onshore because we have the existing wells that I spoke about before, and so the National Energy Company is investing in the utilization of the enhanced extraction techniques. And if I can invite Mr. Wesley to come from BNOC. I know he didn't want to come forward, but I'm putting him on the spot. So I'm inviting him to come forward. They are now looking to engage in enhanced extraction from the onshore wells to be able to have access to more local gas. And specifically to your question for the constituents in Cave Hill and Lodge Hill and those areas, the proposal for cost effectiveness is to allow for areas that do not currently have access to natural gas, but are adjacent to areas that do already, for that expansion to evolve organically, because that's the least cost scenario. And so that is what is earmarked. We have 4 phases, Mr. Chairman, that are earmarked. The country has been divided into 4 segments for the purpose of the natural gas expansion, and there are 4 phases. Phase 1 will be to allow for those areas that are adjacent to existing natural gas infrastructure to be connected first. Phase 2 would then be the areas that are adjacent to the commercial type entities that allow for residential connections. Phase 3 would be things that then focus on things like the topography that may take a little longer. And then phase 4 will be those areas that are completely virgin territory. But we have mapped it out, and I give you the assurance, and all honorable members, the assurance that we are working through the mechanics of what an entire whole of country approach would look like for natural gas. It does come at a cost, and so on that basis, we are making sure that we take the least cost approach first, so that we don't necessarily negate the benefits of persons wanting to have access to natural gas. I'm going to hand over to Wesley now to speak about the details from his perspective.
Thank you, Minister. And my name is Wesley Carter. I am the commercial manager for the Barbados National Oil Company. We are going to engage in an enhanced program to shore up our existing supply of natural gas. We will start with a primary program in the sense that we would do some perforations to existing wells to recover gas that has been trapped there. And we will do that program first before we proceed to any particular drilling program, detailed drilling program. So we will also look at additional strategies and technologies to improve the production of gas, and this goes into technologies like biogas development, and there are actually some entities that we are engaged with at this point in time, whereby we will look at enhancing and looking at the prospects to generate additional gas from those particular technologies.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I want to add an important component onto what I said earlier and what Wesley just mentioned, just in response to the question, how do we then reconcile natural gas with our renewable energy transition objectives and climate? And I believe I spoke about that earlier. But there is an important innovation that this ministry has been a part of, and I want to take a moment just to share very briefly on that. Together with CERMES from the University of the West Indies and with funding support from a number of development partners, the NPC and the BNOC have been involved in the development of the first biogas-powered vehicle in country. And the physicist, Dr. Legina Henry, this is in the public domain, has been in the leadership of this, and this is something that Barbados has then been pioneering in, the use of king grass and sargassum seaweed to be able to power a digester and to convert that into a biogas, which then powers a generator, which then powers up an electric car. And that car, the first car that we launched here in Barbados, is actually owned, and you'll see it branded by SICRI, which is headquartered in Barbados. It's a CARICOM institution, and that kind of work is now looking to be expanded. And so with BNOC, we expect that the first biogas fueling station we expect to be established in Barbados, and if BNOC can speak a little bit about that, because even alongside us developing the capacity to access natural gas, a part of that process is looking at what the renewable energy future will be to replace natural gas, because it is only a transition fuel. So when the natural life cycle of natural gas transitions, what do we transition to? Which biofuel are we going to transition to? And that development work has already begun in the ministry. Wesley?
Thank you, Minister. Right, so as the Minister said, we are, and by Q4 2025, we should have started the particular program whereby we are actually going to use those biogas generators, test them as a pilot exercise to expand further as we go on. So there are good prospects there. We are also looking at the sargassum seaweed project with the University of the West Indies, and there are good prospects for that. We anticipate that with the full development of these particular projects, we could add another 70 million cubic feet of gas production per day.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Minister and team. I want to turn our attention now to to the Department of Commerce and Consumer Affairs, subprogram 0485. What is the ministry's, the context, cost of living? We know that energy and business, these two areas, are major contributors, or the elements and the dynamics of those two areas do affect the average person relative to cost of living. And of course, across the length and breadth of Barbados, we have had persons who have inquired as to what is the government doing relative to cost of living. So I noticed that you have a Department of Commerce and Consumer Affairs. What is your ministry's stance, strategy, approach relative to the monitoring of prices? Not only the monitoring of prices, but is there a policy stance relative to the control of prices? How do you, on a daily basis, ensure that Barbadians are getting the best bang for their buck, and that the cost of living is being controlled in some way, or managed in some way, or mitigated in some way for the benefit of the people of Barbados?
Thank you for the question, Chair. I am going to open the batting for the team, and then I will hand over to the Director of Commerce and Consumer Affairs, Mr. Bertram Johnson, to continue. So a little bit of the history of where this government has gone so far. In July of 2022, I believe the previous minister, the Honourable Carrie Simmons, would have initiated this program where there was a prices compact with the private sector. And that program would have held the markups on a given basket of goods to be able to ensure that the necessities for Barbadians, rice, pasta, chicken, sanitary products, cleaning items, that those items which are considered the necessities in the basic basket of goods, that they capped the markup and that they did not go past 12.5%. Now, I believe that we are all aware that a year ago, that prices compact expired, and we still have been continuing, even outside of the prices compact, to monitor prices. On a monthly basis, in the ministry, we monitor those prices, and we can be in a position, and we do report to Cabinet to advise what is the baseline relative to that July 2022 basket of goods. Which prices have we seen significant increases in? Which prices have we not seen significant increases in? Where we have seen price markup shifting from one product to the next, and that information has historically been published in the newspaper for the public to be able to consume. We then moved into a space where, using the price check platform, Barbadians no longer have to wait for us to publish that information once a month in the public newspapers, but on any given day, they can pull up Price Check and can check prices from one location to the other, from one supermarket to the other, to be able to get a sense of prices. But that was not all that we did. We also saw, at the level of the Prime Minister, a measure which came to effect with regard to the Bridgetown port and port fees and charges, and a reduction in those fees to allow for there to be a minimized pass-through to the consuming public to attempt to mitigate the impact. Now, 90% of all goods consumed in the country are imported, and so therefore inflation is imported. We have no control domestically over first costs. So if the production costs and the manufacturing costs in the overseas importing market are increasing, then the landed costs will increase, and the government having capped up until last year the markups, those increases would be passed on to consumers inevitably because there is a higher first price. So one of the things that Price Check has now sought to do, which is in phase 3 of the program, we've spoken so far about phases 1 and 2. Phase 1 is what we already have. Phase 2 is where we onboard the retailers, the healthy baskets of goods, the small business association. That's phase 2. But phase 3 now is helping retailers to diversify source markets, so that if there are cheaper prices to be found for lower items and mitigate the first cost, then we want to be in a position to connect retailers with suppliers to be able to ensure that we are helping the business community and the consuming public also to have the benefit of lower prices. So it is a comprehensive 360 approach to prices. And so I'm going to pause there for a moment and give the opportunity to the Director of Commerce and Consumer Affairs to come in at this point.
Thank you, Minister Bertram Johnson, Director Acting, Department of Commerce and Consumer Affairs, and I want to thank the Minister for the question. Just following on from the Minister Cummings, the Department of Commerce during the period of, and we can all agree that this decade was ushered in with many dislocations, whether it was COVID-19 pandemic, the global supply chain disruptions, which would have led to what the minister said, the compact being a program that government would have instituted. What the Department of Commerce sought to do in that period was to enhance its data analytics framework. So we would have designed a data analytics framework to monitor the price movements within Barbados, in which we reported to Cabinet. And the beauty of the data analytics framework was it allowed us to see on the reduced markup basket whether the policy intent was being maintained, whether the retailers were actually holding prices at the agreed compact levels. What I want to report here, in having that type of analysis, we were able to discern that in most cases, if not all, for those 47 items, the prices were maintained within the price margins. I would want to say even in 2025, for some commodities for where VAT was waived and duties were reduced, we are still seeing those prices below July 2022 prices. What we sought to do, and the minister alluded to it, is that in terms of enhancing our analytics framework, we are actually now integrating that into the Asakuda system, where we can have first costs. We can start to track the first cost of the landing of certain products in Barbados, so that we can extrapolate basically what, if there are any movements, and we're in a climate right now where there is the notion of tariffs escalation, and to have such a robust data analytics framework would allow us to inform government what are the impact or the knock-on effects of any tariffs and the escalation of tariffs and what that will mean to consumers. And more importantly, how the data then can drive evidence-based policymakers similar to the compact to shield and protect consumers if there's any dislocation or escalation of prices. So I believe where we are positioned today in terms of having a modern data analytics framework that now sits on different systems and when it's integrated with Asakuda, can provide that type of policy analysis that we can actually develop some homegrown stabilizations to keep prices as low as we can, as the minister said. And I will end here. A majority of the inflation is imported inflation. So obviously there are exogenous factors, but at the end, like the compact, we can come up with a compact or anything of a similar nature that we can monitor to say to the government of Barbados that the policy is being monitored and is either being effective in that regard. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll leave that one there. I was going to ask a question relative to the MSME strategy and policy, but I think the honourable member from St. James South would have given you the opportunity to speak on that. Whilst I wanted more specifics in terms of the actual aims and objectives, and even if you had some KPIs, like what do you want to see from the sector in terms of growth, number of new MSMEs. So I'm not going to ask that question. What I'm going to ask you about and give you an opportunity, because I'm not sure if it was discussed today, is with reference to the electronic single window. The electronic single window project. What does that mean to the average Barbadian? What will that bring in terms of benefits for the average Barbadian and consumer? How do you envisage that this will transform the business landscape? As we talk about Business Barbados and we talk about all the other integrated agencies outside of your ministry and within your ministry, how does the electronic single window project benefit the people of Barbados?
Thank you for the question, Honourable Member. So I'm going to take a couple of steps back from the specifics of the electronic single window and speak more to the framework within which it is anchored. The broad umbrella under which the electronic single window sits is Barbados's overall trade facilitation agenda. And trade facilitation is one of those things that is particularly important to me, not just because international trade is my own professional background, or not just because I would have spent time as one of the negotiators for the WTO Trade Facilitation Agreement, and not just because I was a chairman of the Bridgetown Port in a previous life. So if I were to pull all those things together, the broad umbrella of trade facilitation, and therefore the work of the Trade Facilitation Task Force, which sits under the MEB overall, is an important part of the work of this ministry for me, and I personally take an interest in that work. Across the landscape of government, there have been a number of electronic approaches that have been developed. In September 2019, the government introduced the Assecuda World System, and that has continued to evolve, and we now have Assecuda Plus that has been rolled out, and a further upgrade to the Assecuda World System is imminent. We have the port community system that would have started when I was chairman of the port in collaboration with the Caribbean Development Bank and then UNCTAD, to be able to pull all of the various single window structures into a mechanism that allowed for an ease of doing business at the point of trading across borders. Then you have the electronic single window, which is an earlier project that began several years ago and is still in the development process across the country. I am pleased to be able to say that the electronic single window allows us to have additional functionality that does not exist in other places. So for example, the ministry and the project specifically, because Barbados does not trade with itself, we trade with others. The ministry has made a presentation to COTED, the Council on Trade and Economic Development of CARICOM, and invited other countries to partner with Barbados and to work along with Barbados on the rollout of a pilot of the electronic single window. And I want to invite the project manager, Ms. Lana Chandler, to give the details about the status of that onboarding work at the level of CARICOM. And at the national level, we are now in the process with the Ministry of Agriculture, and Ministry of Health will be coming on board, onboarding the thousands of CPC classification codes, which are the tariff lines for goods, into the system. And I want to invite Ms. Lana Chandler to give us some more details, please.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon to the members of the House. I am Lana Chandler, Project Manager for the Electronic Single Window. As Minister would have pointed out, the single window serves as a critical component of trade facilitation, especially in the area of pre-clearance of cargo. It provides for a single point of entry for all trade-related documentation, eliminating repetitive data entry. It provides for seamless integration with existing government systems through secure interfaces and standardized data formats. It also provides for direct connections with key agencies, as Minister would have indicated, such as Customs, for the electronic submission of clearance documents related to applications for import or export. We've also made provision for integration with the EasyPay platform for online payments, allowing therefore for a seamless end-to-end transition or in application for licenses and permits and other regulatory documents for the import and export of goods. As Minister pointed out, we would have gone to the CARICOM Conference on Trade and Economic Development to request that we have a pilot. That pilot would have run for a period of time from June 2024. And coming out of that pilot, we had some very early results, which demonstrated the system's transformative potential. For example, the processing of export certificates of origin have dramatically improved, with 62% of applications being completed within 1 hour of the application being paid for through the platform. So using the end-to-end application process, once the payment has been completed, within an hour, the application is approved. Of the applications that we processed during that period, 17% were approved in less than 4 hours and 18% in less than 24 hours. That shows the significant benefit that has brought to the efficiency in relation to trade processing in Barbados. In short order, we will be rolling out, as Minister said, the remaining agencies under the Ministry of Agriculture during March and April. And we are currently on the threshold of rolling out those agencies, allowing for those certificates to be processed as well through the single window platform. So applications for regulatory documents for import, and specifically import as well as export through Export Barbados, will be available on the platform during this period. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I can, just to circle that square properly and to connect it to the question from the honourable member, how does this then benefit Barbadians? I want it to be clear. Delays in clearing cargo have a run-on effect on prices. If businesses are picking up port charges as a result of delays, if companies are paying demurrage charges, those charges all contribute to the cost of a final good on the shelf. And so it is really important for us to get these trade facilitation measures right, because if we don't have all of these expedited procedures, whether it is pre-clearance, post-clearance audit, working along with the various regulatory agencies that have a responsibility for making sure, on the one hand, they protect Barbadians by allowing only goods that are fit for purpose through our borders, but at the same time, that they are clearing them as quickly and as efficiently as they can do, that those things help to minimize costs, those things benefit Barbadians, those things help to have a positive impact on prices, and those things help our agencies to be more efficient.
Absolutely, thank you. As they say in business, time is money. And I really appreciate and applaud you and your team for the efforts that you're making to bring this level of trade facilitation to our shores. Thank you so much for your very comprehensive answers to my questions, Minister and team. And I yield back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Honourable Member for St. Andrew.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I only have one question now, and it relates to the trust loan program. I really wanted to ask just before he came in, just as your colleague was on the floor. You've spoken a lot about the trust loan program, what it has done for persons, for ordinary Barbadians over the years, and I too can attest to the impact it has had on persons certainly within my constituency, St. Andrew and First St. James, where we have held a number of workshops and we have brought on a number of young people and seen the start of some small businesses in those communities. My question, however, has to do with what support systems are in place for persons who struggle, those persons who have genuine challenges with their businesses. What support systems do you have in place for persons like that after they have gotten the loan and they're out there and they're working, whether it be something to assist them to grow or to assist them if they find themselves failing?
Thank you, Honourable Member. That's such an important question, because we went through COVID and so many small businesses really had a difficult time during that period, and many of those small businesses either had already turned to the trust loans to get started, or they needed to turn to the trust loan for support. And so I think I'm going to ask Jerry Amos to speak about it, but what I can say is that not only did the trust loan program attempt to engage with each and every one of its clients in a meaningful way. What's happening with you? What's the status of the business? What challenges are you experiencing? What do you need? How can we help? The business development officers at the trust loans were encouraged, if I remember correctly, especially during 2022, but 2023 for sure, and 2024, to get out of the offices and to go out to those small business people and to engage with them, to meet with them. You can't lead in the business community from inside your offices, so you have to be on the ground interacting with your community, and that's what the trust loans did. Coming out of that engagement, you then had a restructuring of the majority of their portfolio to be able to allow for persons to have lower repayment amounts over longer repayment time periods, so that people had a chance to catch their hands. In some instances, there were moratoria issued as well, just pausing for a moment. But I'm going to ask Mr. Jerry Amos to share the details of how they really went out there to support our small business community.
Thank you, Minister. Jerry Amos, General Manager, Barbados Trust Fund Limited. Honourable member, rightfully said, a lot of persons from your constituency, your area, will have benefited from the Trust Loan Fund. We actually had a lot of programs in your area, and again, we are returning to St. Andrew with the Office of Insolvency to have other sessions in St. Andrew. To ask your question directly, our support system is relatively solid. Over the last 2 years, we've concentrated heavily on business support. So we have our officers on the ground every day of the week, with the exception of Fridays, because they report back to the office on Fridays, so we can have a pizza session, what we call, where we discuss clients to see where we are at as an organization. So we recognize that there have been a lot of challenges as relates to businesses in Barbados. We have placed a lot of emphasis on ensuring that there are no business closures. So what we have done, the Minister alluded to, we created a restructuring program where we allow persons to come in, do some financial training to ensure that they fully understood what they'll need to do when they get back on their foot. And what we did is we ensured that the payment that they had to make after was less than the payment they were making before, to make it more affordable for them. So that the business, even though we took the weight on our shoulders, we ensure that the business remained open. So that is one of the things that we're doing for sure. That's what we're going to continue to do. We have some other plans coming in 2025, 2026 to ensure that we are out there, to ensure that before a client starts to get themselves into trouble, that we can recognize it. That's why we're using technology. So we could track when we could see a client is beginning to fail, so we could do early interventions to avoid the failure of that business. So thanks again for the question, but we are trying very hard to make sure that we do as good as well as possible to ensure that we support every business on our portfolio.
And just to follow up, I just have one question. I know my colleague, the member for St. Michael Northwest, would have asked about the shift from the paper system to the online system. And we know that this is always, I like to use the term a dichotomy, where there's a use of the old system and the new system, and then over time the old system fades out and the new system takes over. Because there are often persons who will struggle with the new system, which is the online approach. And I imagine that there are still persons out there who, though they're interested in setting their own businesses and they're ready to go and they have that and the training, but they're not that computer savvy. And I'm asking now, along the same lines, the first question I've asked, for those persons who have not yet transitioned in terms of their mind towards the online process, who have not yet been able to get around how to do online forms and go about it in a business in an online fashion, how are you treating to those persons?
Honourable member, we have those persons every day. So what we have done is that we created, within the office, we have a little space for a kiosk. So those persons who are uncomfortable with the online system, they come into the office, we designate someone to sit with them and walk them through the online process. Most of the time, some of these persons out there, believe it or not, don't even have an email address. So we create email addresses for those persons. We walk them through the system. We show them exactly what to do. We register those persons, because after those persons apply for the loan, they can actually track the loan. So we show them how to track the loan by logging back into the system and seeing the progress of the loan as it goes through the system. Remember, it's an end-to-end system, so we don't want it to be lost anywhere along the way, so they can actually track all the way to the end. Starting in April, those persons will also be able to go online after they're disbursed and see how much they owe and be able to pay online at that point in time. So our online payment portal is in place. We are implementing the first week of April, so a person will be able to go on, see the outstanding amount, they can select how much they want to pay at the time and make a payment direct. So we are walking with them all the way, remember, all the way we're walking with them. We understand the challenges persons meet, especially when they sit in front of a computer to have to fill out online forms. They get nervous, they make errors, so we are walking with them all the way. Even those who make errors, the system is smart enough to recognize that error was made. It flags that system, that sends us some notice, and we then contact those persons and say, okay, you made an error in your application, here's how we can help you to recover from that, and let the application come through to our internal process.
Thank you, thank you. Even though I think I heard you answer some aspect of that question before, I'm still glad that you were able to come back and give a more comprehensive treatment to the question, and persons know that there's a system there to some hand-holding that the department has in place for persons who are still struggling with technology. Those are my questions for now, Mr. Chair, so I yield back.
Thank you, Honourable Member.
Nothing, Chair. My question was asked by the Honourable Member for St. Michael North. Thank you.
Honourable Member for St. Philip South.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon to everyone. Minister, congratulations on your presentation, you and your team, and for the work you've been doing thus far, especially with the MSMEs and indeed renewable energy. I'll try to focus my two questions around those two. The first one is, I know with the Trust Loans Program, you have generated a lot of interest from micro businesses and small businesses. And I'd like to know from you if there's a focus program that speaks to coaching and mentoring of these people who are invariably not trained in business, perhaps would need that type of support, even after giving them training before they receive a loan. You still would need some sort of follow-up coaching and mentoring. And using a model that will help them to understand that business is something that you have to stay in for the long term. And therefore, if I give you a loan for X amount and you've paid off that loan and you come back to expand, is there a system through which we sit down with you, look and see what your business is doing, where it's located, how it has been functioning, and who's that officer that's assigned to you to make sure that you're doing proper reports and treating it as a business? Is there such a model within the trust loans?
Thank you, Honourable Member. I'm going to invite on for that question, not just the Trust Loans program to respond, but also the Fund Access program, because what you've described is something that has confronted and challenged I'm sure the financial services community supporting the MSME sector over many, many years, just making sure that you're able to not just provide the loan capital, but able to get businesses to stay open and to grow and to not find themselves in difficulties. We've taken that responsibility quite seriously in this ministry, and I'm going to invite, I'm going to start with trust loans, which has been the question that you've asked, but I'm also going to ask Ms. Esther Lord Graham from Fund Access also to respond and to share some of the initiatives that are already in place and are going to be rolled out even more so over the course of this year in support of the MSME sector.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Honourable Member, for the question. As it relates to persons' continuous training, I often tell my officers that while a loan is for 3 years, those businesses, persons expect them to be for a lifetime and for generational wealth. So we have to stick with those individuals, help them to make sure the businesses are sustainable, and we try to do training in between. I'm not sure if you're familiar with our Manufest program, but that is actually a program set out for manufacturers, and that helps a lot with mentoring, public speaking, costing and pricing, so it helps to develop that business. We are now embarking on a new program because the majority of our businesses are in the services sector. So we're now embarking on a new program. It's called Stay Tech. And that is a services program that will do the same thing that we do for Manufest, but we will add some innovation and some technology to it to ensure that those in services can actually improve their business using technology. So just to answer your question in short, yes, we do. We recognize the importance of businesses remaining open, not just to have a number to say that that person came for a trust fund loan, but that that business strives and adds some economic impact to the economy.
Fund Access, please.
Good afternoon, Esther Lord Graham, General Manager of Fund Access. Similar to Trust Loan, we do have a continuous training program. Our training and business development starts before the loan is disbursed. There's a 2-day program that all applicants and clients undertake called Micro Enterprise Training. After that, our business development officers go in, and through the course of the loan and even after the loan, there's training. And the training is usually geared in particular to general business topics such as HR, customer service, sales excellence, and so on. Financial training is a big part of it. And then wherever possible, there is individual training pertaining to the aspect of the business that the person is engaged in. It is for this reason that we buck the trend that says that 20% of small businesses fail within the first year. This training and business development minimizes business closures and bucks that trend that says 20% of businesses fail in the first year. Thank you.
If I could just close out the question, Honourable Member, by saying that sometimes those are the hard training programs that loan applicants or loan recipients are a party to. But both of these agencies often also have soft type training and engagement. So sometimes in the dead of the night, you may hear Jerry or Esther, one of the officers from these agencies, having to engage with a client who is having emotional challenges in their home, and that's affecting how they're navigating their business. And so they're doing way more for their clients than just providing financial literacy, but they're really engaging with them as people and meeting with them where they are, because one of the things that we found, especially with trust loans, is that it's personal, right? And if you are having all kinds of really difficult challenges in your own personal life, that will impact your ability to focus on your business, to focus on your training that is business specific. And so these teams have undertaken to see people and to face people as they are, not just to provide persons with loans or businesses with loans. These are real people behind the statistics. These are real clients that they're dealing with. And I know that effectively what you're asking is, are we hand-holding? And my answer in short, based on all that we can say, is yes, we are.
My next question, Minister, is to do with renewable energy. We do know that there's a long queue for licenses, particularly for photovoltaics, and that there are many Barbadians who are deemed to be the ones who can afford to make that investment, who perhaps will find themselves high up in the pecking order. But then there's the ordinary Barbadian who would like to enjoy also the benefits of renewable energy, but do not have the financial wherewithal, and therefore will not be anywhere high in the pecking order for renewable energy licenses. Are there any models developed within the energy sector that allows for Barbadians, perhaps in clusters, perhaps through housing solutions, perhaps through cooperatives, to be able to capitalize on the renewable energy as well, thus giving them a chance for the enfranchisement in this space without having to stretch themselves too much to find massive investments to put in?
That's such a sweet question that you've just put on the table, Honourable Member. And it's a sweet question because this is one of the things that excites me about the renewable energy sector. Now, first of all, the earliest licenses for RE in the country date back to 2015, 2016. So this is not a short-term process. These are the earliest licenses. If you recall, the Homeowners' Right for Renewable Energy process, when that was launched, allowing average Barbadians who own their own homes to be able to have access to renewable energy, specifically panels on their roofs. That process does not require a license because the quantums are particularly smaller, and so they're not likely to have to be held in the queue once we have batteries on the grid. And so we should be in a position, once batteries are on the grid, to be able to allow for our old licenses as at 2015, as well as homeowners with smaller systems below a certain size to also be able to get on the grid. But in terms of the investment opportunities, now that's where it becomes really interesting, because you're right, Honourable Member. You have large investors who may be able to come and invest in utility scale projects. You have persons who own their own homes, and those homes have a certain value and have a certain length of certain type of roof that would allow for them to have PV panels. And so they're able to open back up their mortgages, take equity out, go back and have PV panels installed on their roofs, and off to the races they will go. But there is a category of Barbadian who is neither able to do a utility scale project, neither do they have the ability in their own right to be able to have a PV system or a loan coming out of their mortgage. And so what we have done, and we're going to pilot it in a project which we will launch. We've just wrapped up, actually we haven't wrapped it up yet. It's still kind of ongoing. We have the International Financial Corporation on the ground as we speak, and the team members that are not here, some of them are with that team, and they are finalizing the arrangements for Barbados' first large-scale wind farm in St. Lucie, Honourable Chairman. And so in Lamberts is where it is meant to go, and we've been working along with the community to be able to get that there. Inbuilt, Honourable Member, into that wind project is a unit trust mechanism that allows the average Barbadian, persons like me, persons like yourself, to be able to come in with a small investment share and then say, I want to be a part of something that I can't do on my own, but I guess using the cooperative model, coming together in small quantums, just like there became the credit union movement for persons who didn't have the banking, in some instances who preferred credit union approaches over banking. The same thing applies here. We are in the renewable energy space in building a unit trust mechanism so that all Barbadians, large lumpy investment, middle-class investment, low-income, small-scale investment, all Barbadians have a stake and are able to have a return coming out of the use of our renewable energy resources.
So, Minister, if I understand you correctly, then there should really be no major concerns among what we consider to be working-class Barbadians as far as their participation in this space, and that it has been made easy for them, if they want to use the rooftops, to also participate without having to endure the rigors of going through finding investment to participate.
Absolutely, absolutely. Not under this administration. The intention is to make sure that all Barbadians of all income classes are enfranchised and are able to benefit from our natural resources, our wind, our solar, our sun, whatever the type of technology being used, it is for all Barbadians.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Minister.
Honourable member for St. Michael West Central.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me also add my voice in thanking the Honourable Minister and members of her team for joining us today. Honourable Member, I know that you've done a considerable amount of work in what I call essentially a significant expansion of the renewable energy sector in Barbados. And based on all the work that you've done, I'm wondering whether you can tell the Chamber how much foreign exchange we have saved as a result of this significant expansion of all the work you're doing in renewable energy in Barbados. I'm sure that as a result of the many solar farms that we have in and around Barbados, plus the other renewable energy areas that you're focused on, that I'm sure that this perhaps has the potential as it continues to develop to really reduce the quantum of foreign exchange expended on other fossil fuels. So that's my first question.
Thank you, Honourable Member. In 2024, for example, if we looked at the expenditure in the central bank report for the import of fuels, that number reached just under $1 billion in foreign exchange used to purchase fossil fuels. In the Ministry of Energy, we have looked at that as revenue loss and how we can then convert that expenditure as FX for the purpose of renewable energy to be able to have the sun, the wind, everything that is renewable as the basis of our energy consumption. That there are upfront initial capital costs is something that we can't step away from. There is a cost for transitioning a grid that was built for fossil fuels, ultra low sulfur diesel, in most instances being used, that there is a cost also for the procurement of solar panels, that there is a cost for the procurement of inverters and transformers and all of the really relevant technologies. Those upfront capital costs can't be dismissed, but over time, those costs will be significantly reduced and it will replace the foreign exchange being used to procure fossil fuels. But it also gives us a level, Honourable Member, of energy security. With all of the uncertainty in the global environment, I think that most countries who do not have an accelerated timeline for renewable energy transition and drawing from their own domestic sources are potentially looking at a Barbados that has an aggressive timeline for completion and saying, well, maybe we should have gone in that direction as well, even though it comes with an initial capital cost. So I will say that. The second part of it that I will say is that our local banking sector, when I first took the chair in November of 2022, the Honourable Prime Minister established a number of committees for us to work with various parts of the sector on a number of issues. And for the purposes of renewable energy, a committee was established between myself, that was co-chaired by myself, and the chairman then of the Barbados Bankers Association, so that we could start to look at the question of how Barbados could gain revenue, how we could have more Barbados-denominated financial arrangements around the RV sector. And that committee has developed a series of approaches in all of the renewable energy sector. It has been extremely active, and I want to express my appreciation here, not just to my own team, but the members of the business community and the renewable energy community, from the chairman of the Bankers Association, Mr. Shimon McIntosh, to the Barbados Renewable Energy Association, all of them who have worked with us to ensure we can save foreign exchange, denominate power purchase agreements in BBD, and to allow Barbados to save on the expenditure into fossil fuel and to transition to renewable energy faster and rather sooner rather than later.
As a follow-up question, and the reason, Mr. Chairman, as a follow-up question, the reason why I asked the Honourable Minister, if it's at all possible, she can give us the numbers of foreign exchange, because, you know, there's a lot of discussion in Barbados always about the retention of foreign exchange, and that the fact that the Honourable Minister and her team, that they have done such critical work and built out in a very significant way the expansion of the renewable energy sector, it would certainly give the public of Barbados a better understanding regarding the retention of foreign exchange. Because as we well know, when you import fossil fuel and you put it through the generation, through electricity and so on, the fact that we have solar, voltaic, and other renewable energy going onto the grid, that certainly reduces our foreign exchange expenditure. But what it does tell the story that we are retaining a significant amount of foreign exchange into Barbados. I'm not sure, Honourable Member, if you want to come back there, you wish me to move on to the next question. All right, well, thank you. Of course, I represent a constituency, St. Michael West Central. I'm not going to bore you with a long list because that's not for here. But I would certainly ask that in terms of the expansion of natural gas within communities, that due attention be paid to St. Michael West Central, like other areas. There are some areas, Gaskin Road and Alimby Gap and so on, that could benefit substantially, including Fairfield and other areas within the constituency Grisettes, from the expansion of the natural gas. I know that obviously you have to, and I saw it firsthand when I was Minister of Transport Works and Water Resources, when we were doing Highway 1, so I understand the capital costs that has to go in, but I ask you on behalf of the constituents of St. Michael West Central that when you are into your expansion phase, that you take into consideration, like you'll take other constituencies into consideration, a constituency that you also grew up in, Honourable Minister, so you know the area, I think, perhaps just as well as I do. So I will only make that representation. But if you can perhaps give us just, for the benefit of those, especially my constituents listening, what is the plan and how you plan to execute this distribution of natural gas? And I'm with you because I understand that it does involve considerable expenditure in terms of capital expenditure especially. So, but it will be good for those who are listening to hear from you to get a feel in respect of your strategy. And I know that you won't be able to accomplish everything in one go, but it'll be still good to give my constituents an insight as to how you plan to address some of these issues.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. And since I am one of your constituents, I think that I have a vested interest in making sure that there's also natural gas in St. Michael West Central. I agree with you 100%. If I were to pull up a map of the country, I could share with you where natural gas already exists in country, which communities currently have natural gas infrastructure at this point. The first phase of the natural gas expansion, as has been agreed by Cabinet in its preliminary form, will allow for the natural gas expansion to take place in the adjacent areas where we already have natural gas. And so I'm looking at the map here, for example. St. Michael is very spotty, but the areas closest to the coastline are the areas that have natural gas infrastructure already. And so my expectation is that the St. Michael West Central area, the St. Michael area generally would, I expect, be in that phase 1 caption because it already has adjacent natural gas infrastructure. But I am going to ask Mr. Ian Bradshaw of the MPC, who has also worked on this, to be able to come in at this point and to share a little bit more about the natural gas expansion program.
Ian Bradshaw, National Petroleum Corporation again. Minister, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to our future plans. And I wish to assure the honourable member that our intention, as the Minister said, is to look at those areas where there are main arteries going through and see how we can then deliver gas to the tributary roads in those areas. We did look at the entire country and to map out a strategy for natural gas expansion, but we did realize that at this time we have to prioritize that along with our capital maintenance program. And so what we're seeking to do is look for those least cost areas to target first, and certainly the parishes of St. Michael, Christchurch, and St. James in particular, where we see opportunity, we're looking at those first. But as I said before, where strategically we can work with both the private contractors as well as state-owned entities where development is being undertaken, we'll use the opportunity to go into those areas too and deliver the service to as many customers as possible. We're also encouraging persons to understand that NPC is looking to encourage the business facilitation, and so we are going to roll out very shortly a portal which eases with the application process, and we're hoping to onboard as many persons within the upcoming financial year as we seek to grow our base from the current 20,000 odd residential users, certainly to additional 3,000 within the next 2 years.
And as a follow-up question, it would be good to explain, now we're here in the well of Parliament, to the Barbadian public who often inquire, why is it that you will have natural gas on the right side of the street, but they're living on the opposite side of the street, but they can't get natural gas? We will understand it. I understand it from where you sit, but I think it would be very helpful now that we have the officials here with the minister and the public listening to explain to them why is it not possible, and just talk a little bit about, you know, what has to be done and why even though you see natural gas on one side of the street, it's not accessible on the other side of the street.
Thanks for that question, Honourable Minister. I'm going to ask Mr. Bradshaw to come in there. It's one of the issues that we've been navigating, especially in some rural areas where you may have a satellite station for natural gas, but it does not then extend to those persons in the community. When we were, for example, doing the mains replacement on My Lord's Hill, if you remember when that was taking place on the main road of My Lord's Hill, one of the things that we experienced at the time was that we had to pause reconnecting the natural gas infrastructure because there were persons who in the side roads along My Lord's Hill were interested in natural gas and wanted to be connected, but the program didn't include those areas. And so we had to pause, expand the capability for connections, but we also had to get on the ground. I remember going on the ground in my Timberland boots with the team, working with the colleagues from MPC as well, and those colleagues went house to house, door to door in those areas with their clipboards and with their sign-up sheets, inviting persons to sign up for natural gas in those adjacent areas. And then once that sign-up took place, then onboarding them, which delayed the reinstatement of the road. So while persons were very inconvenienced by the delays of reinstating My Lord's Hill coming down the main road, it really was for the purpose of allowing the MPC to onboard persons in the adjacent roads coming down My Lord's Hill so that those persons could have access to natural gas. And that has been our approach for all of the communities, but I'm going to ask Mr. Bradshaw as well then to speak about why in some communities it's on some streets but not on the others. And I'm going to share very shortly a map of the island and what the natural gas infrastructure looks like so you can see, because it is in a very limited part, it's very limited throughout the country. But the final thing that I would say before I hand over to Mr. Bradshaw is that one of the things that we've done more over the last 2 years is to work in hand with, as you would know as a former Minister of Transport, with the Ministry of Transport and Works and the Utilities Subcommittee, so that you're not digging up roads that don't need, that are just freshly repaved. When, for example, Broad Street was being redone by MTW reached out and said, okay, we have the road up. Do you want to take the opportunity to do the mains replacement there now? And MPC immediately said, yes, the road is up. Let's get in the underground space and begin the process of looking at the transmission lines. We also did some work in the upper part of Odessa McLean Drive, where we removed a transmission line and placed it under the roadway, which is in line with international best practices. And before, it was above ground and houses had been built on top of it without permission. And so we wanted to keep people safe. So all of those are some of the dynamics that go into it. So I'm going to hand over to Mr. Bradshaw at this point.
Thank you again, Minister. We must appreciate that a lot of the natural gas infrastructure, particularly in the St. Michael area, would have been in place for 40 or so years in some instances. And quite often, the development in those areas has outpaced the ability of MPC over the years to match this development. So infrastructure would have been placed in the main arteries in many cases, and so persons along that main artery would have been able to benefit from natural gas. But unfortunately, over time, as development has taken place, and Barbados has certainly become more densely populated within that period, the infrastructure that existed originally wasn't able to accommodate that further development. We are trying to, as I said before, formulate a plan where we can take advantage of those tributary roads, and at the same time, we are doing an enhanced marketing and PR campaign to allow persons to understand, those persons who are on the tributary roads and those who can get access, to reach out to natural gas so that our marketing and our technical teams can come out and do that investigation. Quite often it is possible, but persons may have been informed that it was not possible by word of mouth. And so we are certainly encouraging persons to reach out to us, and we will more than be willing to come out, do the investigation, and advise where it's possible for those persons to benefit too as well. We have the benefit of payment plans that help to facilitate the initial investment, because we understand that it's, for some persons it may be prohibitive, and so those things are also available too as well. So for all members in here who have constituents who are expressing interest, please reach out to the National Petroleum Corporation and we will do our investigations. And you can be assured, as the Minister said, it is part of a greater plan to give more and more Barbadians the benefit of our service.
Perhaps I'm going into the future, but Honourable Minister, I'm wondering if perhaps you can let us know whether or not a comparative analysis or analyses have been done regarding the use of natural gas versus solar or other renewable forms of energy for cooking, especially through electric means. I just thought I would ask that question because I don't know the answer, but of course, it will be useful for us to maybe to look to the future, because yes, natural gas is in abundance globally, but the issue also relates to the shift into renewable energy. I don't believe I'm putting you on the spot, because I'm sure you're very well versed, as you've so ably displayed in the chamber today, on matters relating to energy. So if you could give us perhaps your take, your opinion in respect of potential sources as for renewable energy for cooking.
Thank you very much for the question. It's a complex question because there are a number of variables. So if I were to start with the question of the cost of natural gas, we have modeled the cost of imported gas, and we currently import the vast majority of our natural gas, versus the cost of local gas, domestic gas coming from our oil and gas wells here on island. Remember, if I started out by saying that we had over 257 oil wells on island, of which only 56 or so were in use. Some of them were consistent producers, some of them were intermittent producers. So if we start to whittle down those numbers, we start to see that natural gas is something that we have to model very carefully. But if we throw another number on top of that, the cost of domestic gas is 50% less expensive than the cost of imported gas. So if we have the potential to use local domestic gas, then that becomes something that we would want to pay attention to. But the cost of the enhanced recovery that was mentioned earlier is somewhere upwards of $30 million. So if we start thinking about the sunk cost to be able to undertake enhanced recovery to get to that 15% recovery for natural gas, then the baseline for the differential between natural gas domestically produced and natural gas imported will change. And you may no longer find that natural gas is as inexpensive as it is now if you have to have those sunk costs. So then let's consider the cost of renewables and the panels that go on the roof. You have a feed-in tariff regime and so on. So inevitably, the electrification of cooking becomes imminently less expensive if we are moving in the direction of renewables, but that is done over time. And so the recommendation, therefore, would be that we have to be very clear about how we phase the use of natural gas alongside the use of renewable energy to power electrification. In the Energy Transition Investment Plan, we've modeled that. And we've looked at what it would cost to transition from the current sources. In this case, in Barbados, typically we use natural gas. If you're not using natural gas, you're using LPG. That's 100% imported. So how do we move from either LNG or LPG, the big bottles, or alternately to electrification for cooking? That is a huge component of the Energy Transition Investment Plan, and we would want to make sure that we're moving in the direction of the renewable sources of energy for the purposes of cooking as we progress over time.
Honourable Minister, I wish to thank you for your very broad explanation on the matter of energy, and to wish you and your team every success as you continue to work in the interests of all Barbadians. Mr. Chairman, I'm obliged.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Honourable Member for St. James North.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Honourable Minister, welcome you to the Lower House, and just want to address you and your team on one particular issue, the Office of Public Counsel, sub-program 469. Of course, this office and the whole issue of consumer protection is regulated under law by the Consumer Protection Act, Chapter 326, and the Consumer Guarantees Act as well, under which the Consumer Claims Tribunal is constituted. And I want to give you the opportunity to inform the country how this tribunal has been functioning. I was a member of the very first tribunal for 6 years, established under the ministerial mandate of the Honourable Ronald Toppin, who served in this chambers for a very long time and served very well. So, can you let us know how this tribunal has been functioning, if it's been getting more claims within recent times than has happened before, if most of the claims are settled before it reaches the tribunal, and if, in fact, we have a public counsel right now. And also in terms of the future, I mean, this legislation is now, what, about a quarter century old, and as to whether there are any plans to reform it or modernize this legislation in any way. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. We are actually on the eve of World Consumer Rights Day, which is next week, and I want to invite all honourable members and, of course, members of the public to join us. We have a week of celebrations. We will commence with a church service on Sunday at Sanctuary Empowerment Center, my home church. So you're welcome to join us on Sunday morning at 10. We have a series of walkthroughs. Honourable Member for St. Andrew, we have one which is in Orange Hill, we have St. Thomas as well, which has been included. There's a queue in the community one night. There are a series of activities, but I'm going to ask my PS, Mr. Kevin Hunt, in a few moments to share what those activities are. The Office of Public Counsel specifically, we did have a public counsel up until several months ago. He has since demitted office, and only this week, the PRC, the People Resource Commission of the Public Service, advised that they have now completed interviews and the recruitment process for a new public counsel that will allow for the functioning of the Consumer Affairs Tribunal and the Office of Public Counsel jointly to address consumer matters. Now, the Consumer Affairs Tribunal is duly constituted. It is in place. It is ready to go. We have had, over the last year, a significant body of work done on getting the records digitized so that they're able to access the documents. In these estimates this year, you will see that there is an innovation that is expected, and we intend during the course of this year to make it easier for people to access the Consumer Affairs Tribunal by launching our first virtual Consumer Affairs Tribunal. And we're not talking here about a Zoom platform on its own, but we've seen models in different parts of the world where you actually have a genuine virtual tribunal set up where the Office of Public Counsel will be able to interact with members of the public to respond to queries and complaints and concerns which they have. Even without an Office of Public Counsel, a public counsel, I should say, the Office of Public Counsel has continued to work. They have continued to have a series of community outreach programs across the country. They have continued to have sensitization programs across the country, and they have not been hindered in any way by the absence of a public counsel, and I want to commend them. I want also, though, to share that between the Consumer Protection Act and the Consumer Rights Protection Act and the Consumer Guarantees Act, the two pieces of legislation actually fall between the ministry under the Office of Public Counsel on the one hand and the Fair Trading Commission on the other hand, and that consumer work continues apace, and I want to hand over on the Office of Public Counsel to my permanent secretary, Mr. Kevin Hunt, while Ms. Dava Leslie, who is officer in charge of the FTC, but who is substantively responsible for consumer affairs, I want to give her an opportunity to share from the FTC's perspective as well.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Chair. Kevin Hunt, Acting Permanent Secretary in Ministry of Energy and Business. As our Minister indicated, notwithstanding the absence of a public counsel, the Office of the Public Counsel has indeed continued to service the needs of Barbadians. And so we can inform this Honourable Chamber that they have, within the last year, provided advice to 180 consumers and 87 suppliers concerning their rights and responsibilities under the Consumer Guarantees Act. They have also received, out of that, 113 new complaints. But they haven't just received the new complaints, Chair. They've been able to negotiate and manage settlements in 85 of those complaints. They've been able to mediate 22 disputes between consumers and suppliers, resulting in 10 being completely settled and 6 complaints then being referred to the Consumer Claims Tribunal once that tribunal is able to be operationalized with the implementation of a public counsel. We can also state that they collected and dispersed the amount of $5,062.75 to consumers in the form of refunds and compensation payments as well. So notwithstanding the absence of the Public Counsel Chair, they continue to function and continue to provide the service to Barbadians. Thank you.
Thank you, PS. Ms. Dava Leslie Ward. Dava?
Thank you for that question. Dava Leslie Ward, Officer in charge of the Fair Trading Commission and Director of Consumer Protection. At the Fair Trading Commission, we work really hard to protect the consumers of Barbados, and it has been ongoing. And we do take kindly your comments that the legislation has been well over 20 years old, and there is a need for modernization. As a result of that, the Commission has actually undertaken a modernization program for consumer protection, and we are looking closely at making changes to reflect two main issues. So on the one hand, we're looking at the retail services sector, and a lot of the abuses has changed. When that legislation passed, that was in the early 2000s, and the retail services sector, as we know it, is so different now. A lot of the issues that are arising are occurring on digital platforms, and we need to be able to address those assiduously. We are working hard on that. There's actually a very detailed matrix of the legislation where we are looking at what has occurred, where the mischief is occurring, and we're looking to make changes to the Consumer Protection Act right away. In addition to that, one of the main issues that has been arising is within the financial consumer protection. That is an area that has developed. However, the regime as it was back in 2000 was very simplistic, but changes clearly need to be made because the complexity of the financial issues that are coming to us has definitely changed. So that is one of the areas that we're working on in the upcoming financial year, where the Commission is looking to modernize financial consumer protection all across the island. And this is an initiative that is going to be looked at by the Commission, but worked on as a project within the ministry.
I thank you, Minister, and your officers for that response. Just one clarification, though, for the record. The Consumer Claims Tribunal, you're talking about, not the Consumer Affairs. That's correct? Yeah.
Yes, Chair, that's correct.
Okay. Thank you, Honourable Chairman.
Thank you, Honourable. Members, Honourable Minister, you now have 10 minutes to wrap up.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you very much all honourable members of the Chamber who have engaged and who have asked questions that represent those that are being asked in the public domain by members of the Barbadian community. And so we very much value your feedback and your input. I want to take the time, as I started, I really want to finish by focusing on the things that we have been working on over the last year and the things that we will be focusing on as we go forward. Mr. Chairman, we have had the opportunity this year to design, to create, and to launch a new entity, Business Barbados. Business Barbados is responsible for transforming the landscape of doing business across the country. We are very proud of the work that has started, and we are committed to seeing it through. We have, over the course of this year, Mr. Chairman, also designed and are on the eve of launching the amalgamated entity of the Barbados National Oil Company, the Barbados National Energy Company, Barbados National Petroleum Corporation, and the Barbados National Terminal Company. Those entities will now become the Barbados National Energy Company. And we're not just proud that we have been able to amalgamate these large entities into the country to drive the commercial side of the energy transition in this country, but again, as we have done with everything else, we have done so with people at the center and with no job losses at any of the entities. Not at Business Barbados, not at the Barbados National Energy Company. I want also to celebrate the completion this year of a long process of the Capital Mains Expansion Program under the NPC. And I want to signal very clearly, especially given the number of queries that have been raised by honourable members, that this government is committed to a capital mains expansion program, not just a replacement program, but an expansion program to take into account the needs of all of your constituents. We've also, over the course of this year, undertaken significant work in the renewable energy sector, and we've heard about some of that today. We have completed a brand new piece of legislation, which is the first and most comprehensive piece of legislation in the renewable energy sector, and it will repeal and replace, or rather it has repealed and replaced the Electric Light and Power Act, and we now have the Electricity Supply Act. That is in effect, and we have a team of persons working as we speak under the leadership of the former Chief Justice of Barbados, Sir David Simmons, working through the regulations that will operationalize that piece of legislation, and I am very confident in the work of that team. There's also a significant body of work that we have done that has not been done, not just in Barbados, but anywhere else in the region, to prepare us for the launch of Barbados's first battery energy storage system. This battery energy storage system procurement has taken the last year, Mr. Chairman, because it required us to do all of the development, administrative, and regulatory work that did not exist. There was no regime governing it, and so we had to build it from scratch. And countries from around the region are now approaching Barbados and asking for our guidance on how we have done so. What is not captured in these estimates of expenditure, Mr. Chairman, is the amount of technical assistance that we have benefited from as part of the goodwill of the international community who has been supportive of our work. And I want to take a moment to perhaps quantify that. We have seen and we have quantified over $2 million, conservatively speaking, this is USD, in technical assistance coming from the international partners with whom we've worked just on the process of developing battery energy storage systems for Barbados. So we did not have to put those in our estimates of expenditure because that was provided without cost to the government and the people of Barbados. Equally, Mr. Chairman, we are now in the process of finalizing the wind project, that project that has been long talked about. We are going to be, during the course of the end of this month into the very first 2 weeks of April, launching first the request for proposals for Barbados's first battery energy storage systems and the request for qualifications for Barbados's first major wind farm, and that wind farm will be between 30 to 60 megawatts, and it will span the St. Lucie down to the St. Thomas corridor. That is major, substantial capital expansion that Barbados can expect to see the benefit not just of the RE, but the investment in RE, the support for communities in those areas, and with it, the firming up of our grid and the benefits to Barbadians overall. The FTC is in a process of reform. They have looked at the organizational structure. They've looked at what is a fit-for-purpose regulatory entity. That work is advanced. That consultancy was undertaken during the course of this year. And during the course of the upcoming financial year, we are very much looking forward to the rollout of that program. Trust loans and fund access came up quite a bit today, and I want to thank them and their team members who are not here today for the work they have done in supporting the MSME sector in the country. The launch of an MSME policy and strategy, I want to recognize Mr. Anderson Cumberbatch for anchoring that work in the ministry and working with all of the stakeholders. And in so doing, I'm looking forward to rolling out the implementation roadmap in partnership with the business support community, including the Small Business Association, the Barbados Coalition of Service Industries, and all others. Mr. Chairman, if I had an infinite amount of time, I could say thank you to so many parties, but I don't. So many partners, but I do not. But I want to just continue to say to our colleagues that we have walked this journey so far together, and we will continue to do so, not just among our team, but our team is an extended team of public, private, civil society, service organizations, service support entities, and individuals just working in support of our country. And I want to thank them for working with us. I want to thank them for giving me the honor of leading them. And I want to commend all of the honor, commend this head of expenditure to the honorable members and beg to move that head 92 stand part.
Honourable Leader of Government Business.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Allow me, on behalf of the House, to thank the Honourable Minister and her entire team for the participation in these estimates and to move that head 92 stand part.
Question is that head 92 stand part. All honourable members in favor, say aye. All members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that you do now report progress to His Honour the Speaker and beg leave to sit again.
The question is that I do now report progress to His Honor the Speaker and beg for leave to sit again. All honorable members in favor, say aye. Honorable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
The chairman has reported progress and requests leave to sit again. Honorable Leader, Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move the suspension of the House for 15 minutes, 20 to 5, please.
The question is that this honorable chair will be suspended until 5 p.m. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This honorable chair stands suspended until 5 p.m.